Compton, California, 2009. Lucio Roder was found in an alley. Hands cuffed, behind his back, bandanas tied around his eyes and in his mouth. He's not in the land of the living any longer. One of the FBI's many informants quickly has some information for them. He'd seen members of the infamous Mexican Mafia in a tattoo parlor with Mr. Roder just before he went missing. And they said that the guy that ordered it was named Ralph Perico Rocha, a member of La M. FBI determined that it was Rocha who ordered it. And 15 years later, he still hasn't been charged. Why is that? Well, the same answer as in a lot of these cases, because he started working with the feds. 5 months after he ordered Roder to be taken out, he became an informant for the ATF, who ended up using him to help indict his whole gang, the 38th Street, which is about a 100-year-old gang at this point, one of the oldest and largest Mexican gangs in the city of LA. If you heard of the Zoot Suit Riot in the 40s, well, that was them. And some people credit 38th Street with making up the whole Zoot Suit style.
Well, Mark, the 38th Street Gang is one of LA's largest gangs. It has been around since the 1920s. This takedown is the result of an 18-month investigation. Officers were out at 1 o'clock this morning until 8 a.m.
So you can imagine the feds were excited to be able to bring an indictment against them, and then he also went on to do some more work of an international nature, which we'll get into in part 2. As for Lucio Roder, he came to LA at the age of 3, his parents chasing the American dream. He joined 38th Street. He got the name Bad Boy. When he was 17, he caught a manslaughter case. He went to the joint. He got out in 1992 when he was 23 years old. It was the peak of LA crime, and he was somebody that had some respect within 38th Street, having served time for manslaughter. But he also went to college. He started making money. He opened a restaurant. He was like a beverage distributor. Sounds like he might have had a foot in the underworld, but he was never indicted or anything. He he got married, had kids, raised a family out in the suburbs, but he was back in the 38th Street area running his restaurant all the time. And his brother says that he, because of his respect within the gang community and his success in the business world, when guys would get out of prison, they'd want to come and talk to his brother. Sounds like he was a budding young powerhouse in the 38th Street hierarchy. So fast forward to 2009. Rigoberto Villasenor, a member of 38th Street, nicknamed Pallone, goes to Lucio Roder, the guy that everyone goes to for help, but he wants kind of some serious help. His son has been snatched and is being held, and he suspects another 38th Street guy named Arturo Crook Alvarez of doing it. So sounds like there was a civil war going on in this very large gang. This is a gang, a lot of money was always generated by them. In the late 80s and early 90s, at the peak of the crack era, LAPD was putting roadblocks and barricades in their turf because there was so much open-air drug markets. Crook Alvarez was a guy who led the extortion efforts at the Alameda swap meet, which generated up $5,000 or more per week. They would just go in and charge all the small vendors. So if you get $50 from 100 vendors, that's $5,000 a week, and they kick that up to whoever I think maybe 38th Street and F13 might have been splitting the money there, or at different times, different of those groups had control. And that's the lifeblood of the Italians to this day, even in Sicily and in New York. In New York right now, pizza parlors and all type of businesses are paying kickbacks not to be bothered. So extortion money is the easiest money of all. And it sounds like these 38th Street guys got into that. So Crook was in charge of extorting the money at the swap meet, and he kidnapped this Villasenor's 17-year-old son. So one of these other FBI informants testified he was at a meeting at the restaurant owned by Lucio Roder, and he's telling Crook Alvarez, they saw your face, they know it was you. Just give the boy up. But he doesn't. And he's asking for a ransom. And a few days pass, And the FBI goes to Crook Alvarez's door. Boom, 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 FBI, they shotgun the door, sledgehammer it in. They grab Alvarez and they take him out to a red Honda Odyssey, a gold Honda Odyssey van. Doesn't sound like FBI property, because it wasn't. Because it was one of the rival sects of the 38th Street. Wasn't the FBI. They throw Crook Alvarez in the van, they speed off. Local police are alerted, they start chasing them. And they chase him across this big freeway that goes from where they were at, like kind of towards maybe Long Beach through downtown LA. And they get off on the near west side, the infamous Hoover. They're driving down 100 miles an hour. They're being chased. The van stops. Some guys get out and run. But the sheriff's department and the LAPD and the helicopter, they stay on the van because they figure there's a kidnapped victim in it. And the van kills more time, and eventually the van spins out, and the driver runs and gets away. They don't show you on the chases in LA. Do you think they always get caught? There's a reason people flee, because they get away sometimes. So the van had let out the two people who got away, and then the driver gets away. But in the van is Crook Alvarez, and he couldn't get away because he couldn't run because he wasn't alive. So now we have two people tied up. Boom, boom. A few weeks after Crook Alvarez is found in a van on 55th and Hoover, the Villasenor family turns over $150,000 ransom payment in Tijuana, and their son is released in downtown LA. So, be interesting to see all the paperwork in this case of what was going on. I mean, was this a drug debt, or like they owed money across the border? Sounds like some wild activities. Sounds pretty scary, and that's why you should steer clear of La M, because they play big boy games for keeps. Now, Lucio Roder, remember, is the one who seemingly kind of ordered Crook Alvarez to be snatched up, and he knew he was going to have to deal with the potential consequences of that. I mean, I guess he probably had authority of his own to some degree, but there were other people with more authority or just that he felt answerable to. So he shows up at a meeting with these people. He shows up to meet these two guys, and one is nicknamed Clown Omos. Omos was a big guy, 6'1", 230. In the year 2000, he had been hit in an earlier 38th Street indictment, went to federal prison for crack cocaine and AK-47s. And Clown and a guy named, I think, Garcia, meet Roderte, and they take him to meet the big man, which turns out to be Ralph Rocha at this tattoo parlor, the Lost Angels Tattoo Parlor. Ralph Rocha, the soon-to-be informant, is waiting. He tells Mr. Roderte, how much money you got? You got 100,000, we'll let you go. So it sounds like they're really just kidnapping each other. And again, it sounds like it's a civil war. But Rocha was a made member of the Mexican Mafia at this point, so he had the most power. Roderte is refusing to give him any money. He tells Olmos, this is your mess to clean up. He lays the responsibility for dealing with Roderte. So whether they were taking Roderte out in retaliation for what he did to Alvarez, or they just wanted money out of him, or both, either way, it sounds like really they wanted the money out of him. Olmos Garcia ends up being the one who take him out in that alley in Compton that we referenced at the beginning of the story. And not long after that, Olmos, the big guy, was found deceased, shot up in the head and chest behind the steering wheel of his own truck in Watts. Things got real serious real fast. So these are some of the roughest characters on the streets of LA at the time. So there's been all these homicides. No one's in custody yet. LAPD is making this a big priority. And a few months pass, and and Rocha gets, the MA member gets picked up in an extortion case, and this is when, yet another extortion case, and this is when the sequence of events leading to him being an informant starts. He's facing life in prison. He tells the sheriff's department, Major Crimes Bureau, he's ready to talk. So he was planning on talking. He knew he was done, so he had made a plan to talk. They start asking him about the homicide of Lucio Roder. He acts like he doesn't really know him that well, but he thinks he recognizes his face, and that another MA member, who was a 38th Streeter, a guy named Cisco Munoz, seen here, was trying to extort Roderte for his restaurant. So these guys are all trying to just extort each other. So there's people who are willing to sell drugs, there's people who are willing to rob, and then I guess the top of the criminal food chain in terms of aggressiveness is just, I just take the proceeds of other tough guys and skip doing any work myself. And so Rocha says that Munoz, fellow 38th Street MA member, was squeezing Roderte for his restaurant, and leaves out the part about Crook Alvarez and having him snatched up. So eventually the police figure out that Rocha was in fact involved in snatching up Alvarez, but he says, well, I was just wanted to get some money for him for Munoz, and I never ordered anything. I left him with Olmos and said, this is your mess to clean up. And the police say, well, what does that mean in your world? And he says, well, that means take him out. So to me, he's confessing to a kidnap, extortion, homicide. It really wouldn't matter what he could snitch on. Nothing's worse than that. See, this is the problem with a lot of these informants, from Sammy the Bull Gravano to shit. In the Tekashi case, he committed one of the worst crimes in the whole indictment. So you let Sammy the Bull confess to 17 murders or whatever to get John Gotti for 5 because he was the boss. Same thing in this case. You have this Rocha guy who is involved in probably the homicide of Alvarez and Roderte, and you're letting him just, because he did some other stuff for you, walk away, and we'll see what happens with him. So the LAP, so Rocha really knew how to talk to the police because they were all hot and bothered to protect him, because he says he could get Mexican Mafia, Armenian Mafia, and overseas. He can get people in another country because he claims that a Mexican group called La Familia is trying to broker a deal with 38th Street, or really with the Mexican Mafia, to protect their members in U.S. prisons in exchange for getting that work, that glass, at a cheap enough price so they can corner the market in L.A. So he gets out after 2 months. He cuts a deal for 2 months. So mind you, this guy, they have evidence that he certainly participated in one kidnap, homicide, possibly 2. Not to mention extortions. He does 60 days. The case against the guys in the van, remember the crazy van thing where they kidnap Crook Alvarez out of a house, they flee, they get away, they leave his body. So the guy that picked up Roderte Garcia with almost a big guy who got gunned down in Watts, he ends up being the one, along with a few other guys, they go on trial for Crook Alvarez in the van. People get away with some pretty wild crimes. They snatched this guy out of his house. Somebody did. Maybe it wasn't Garcia. Snatched this guy out of his house, took the police on a chase, ran and got away, didn't get taken to custody months later, left him in the van, unalive. Jury is not liking Rocha's testimony, and the prosecutors know it, so they end up cutting a deal with Garcia, just plead guilty to kidnapping. So he's out. He did, every 10, 12 years, he got out. LA newspaper tried to interview him. He didn't want to be interviewed much, but he did have a statement where he said, hey, I served my time, it's over with, so I discussed the case. He did say Rocha is a fraud who utilized and betrayed his organization and the government for self-preservation. By bargaining with Rocha, police and prosecutors got paid for more than what they got. He was out in the streets trying to create stuff to give the government, and at the end of the day, they gave an unworthy informant a deal he didn't deserve. Sounds like Roacha might have been the most dangerous guy in this whole situation.
The 38th Street Gang became a target today. City, state, and federal law enforcement officials staged a major crackdown. Gang members are accused of violent crimes, drug trafficking, and extortion in South LA. KCAL 9's Randy Page is live now with details of dozens of arrests. Randy.
Well, Sylvia, this is considered one of the most notorious and oldest gangs in Los Angeles. One glance will tell you which gang claims this territory. The 38th Street Gang has been here since the 1920s. Today, law enforcement has something to say.
We're sending a message that not just the Los Angeles Police Department, but the full weight of the criminal justice system on the state, federal, and local levels are committed to making our neighborhoods safer.
And a massive indictment against 38th Street came down soon after that, thanks in part, no doubt, to Ralph Perico Rocha, former M.A. Colonel, but he was just getting started with his work for the feds. Remember, he had sold him a bill of goods. And in the next part of the story, his snitching goes international. Al Prophet, America Dope.